Isn't it kind of weird how people insist there's not a bias in the media? They claim that there is no liberal media, and it's mostly people who are liberals who say this. Because here's a story from Wired. 5 of the top far-right figures are British. We're world leaders in hate. Britain dominates the top 10 list of leading far-right influencers, according to a new report by Hope Not Hate, with much of their success being driven by followers outside the UK. Okay, we can talk about the UK being leaders in hate. Can we talk about the far left personalities that come out of the UK? Because they exist. I'm not going to name them. I don't want to drag anybody, but there's several. I know some of them personally. Are we going to include them in your assessment? Oh, no, it's because only conservatives are hateful. Look, people often complain, oh, Tim's coming in and defending the right and all that stuff. I'm like, dude, you literally wrote a piece saying that these people are far right and they're full of hate. Okay, the left is full of hate too. Where's your identical article, Wired, which is supposed to be a legitimate news source, talking about that issue? More importantly, the reason I wanted to talk about this is, first, we'll go through the list, but what makes these people far right is one of the big questions, right? So they show Tommy Robinson. Okay, I understand why. I think what they mean by far right is essentially like, I don't know, not mainstream conservative, but Tommy Robinson is actually kind of to the left of some individuals who are conservative. Like, I think Tommy might be left of Ben Shapiro. And not only that, but a lot of people have told me that Tommy Robinson's like a union guy. So he's like actually kind of more centered. But what does far right really mean? Is it because these people are critical of an ideology of a religion? Does that mean that in the 2000s, when the left criticizes Christianity, they're far right? Are the people today who condemn evangelicals far right because they're criticizing an ideology? You're going to have to explain this one to me. I'm not a fan of Tommy Robinson, okay? because he was talking smack about me on Instagram. And one of my videos got taken down because fans of his flagged it. I'm not going to put that on him. That's not his fault. But fans of his, came at me. But you know what? I wonder, what does it mean to be far right? And how do they define Tommy as far right? Admittedly, it was a long time ago. I made a video where I mentioned that I think I read an article that said he was far right. And then a bunch of people got mad at me because he's not, apparently. Apparently he's not a right-wing conservative type. But here's the thing. This tweet. Good news. The UK is a world leader. Bad news. It's in far-right influencers. And I saw this and I went, why is that bad news? Why is it that they're, ultra conservative or, far-right individuals bad news? I personally don't like the idea of extremists. In my opinion, it's weird that they single out the right in this manner because the far left are extremists too, and far left influencers are extremely dangerous. I figured it out. It's because Wired, UK, these digital news outlets, they are far left extremists. They're not going to talk about themselves. And this is exemplified by what we saw with Jussie Smollett and the eagerness for so many people in the digital media sphere to push the story uncritically, not even saying alleged. Many of these outlets flat out said Jussie Smollett was attacked. Now you've got this story where a conservative was minding his own business in Berkeley and someone punched him in the face. And it's hilarious. There's an article, I think it's CNN because a bunch of conservatives are sharing this image, and it says something like conservative was allegedly assaulted, and the photo is literally him like flying backwards with a fist in his face. It's like, dude, that's not an allegation. We literally watched it happen. So when Wired UK comes out and says it's actually bad news that you have far-right influencers and that they're all full of hate, okay, that's clearly biased, right? I'd have no problem if they said, good news, the UK is a world leader. Bad news, it's in far left and right influencers because, yes, there are far left influencers in the UK. But maybe the issue is they're not leading the pack in terms of far left influencers. I'll give them that. Simply because they're talking about the right doesn't mean they're not talking about the left. But at the same time, they kind of aren't. And so let's take a look at their list of names. First of all, Carl Benjamin is not far right, okay? I know Sargon. I have done streams with him. By all means, criticize him because I have, and to him, and he knows I have. I've criticized him for in the past being a relatively mean person. Like, I don't think he's a mean person in person, but the videos he used to make were overly like denigrating or disparaging or just mean. And I felt like, several years ago, it's ineffective. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to help you. It's just an emotional gratification to make a video mocking someone and insulting them. But Sargon's videos today, he's actually done some really great long form analysis pieces, and most of his content at this point is actually pretty, in my opinion, it's good. I don't agree with a lot of his positions, but I think we do agree on many issues. I think Sargon now, he did like a political compass test. I think he's kind of like center right. I'm center left. So I think Sargon's actually in a similar place as someone like Luke Rudkowski, except for the fact that there's still, well, actually, no, Luke, if you're familiar with Luke, is more of like a libertarian right-winger. So I think he's actually further right than Sargon. But this is on the economic scale, not the political scale. So let's look at this. First of all, Paul Joseph Watson, I would not call far right. I would call him like, I don't know, heterodox. Tommy Robinson, I think you could call a conservative because he takes... He's particularly focused on like traditional issues. And I could be wrong. Actually, maybe that's not fair. I think Tommy's primarily focused on anti-ideological extremism. But it's interesting then that I think he's had beef with Maajid Nawaz. But I think for the most part, they both kind of are like, I don't know how to describe it. Admittedly, I don't know enough about him and Maajid, but I think they're actually kind of, not necessarily at extreme odds with each other, but kind of critical of each other. I'm not entirely sure. Milo is a provocateur. I wouldn't call Milo far right at all. And so first of all, let's talk about what far right means. On the economic scale, it means you're a free market capitalist. So this is why a lot of people get angry when they talk about right and left. And we're going to talk about why you can't call these people far right, because we're going to be factual here. The political compass, as most people, it's what's typically used for the most part because it's a little bit more in depth, has 4 quadrants. The top of the chart is the authoritarian spectrum. The bottom is the libertarian spectrum. Left and right is cooperative and competitive. And I think we should get rid of left and right on the political compass and just say cooperative and competitive. Cooperative libertarian. This is left libertarian. It's the quadrant that I am based in. And admittedly, Sargon used to be there too, but I think he's now in the competitive spectrum. What this basically means, if you are left libertarian, you don't believe you have a right to exert authority over others. You don't believe in violence. You don't believe in threatening people. And you believe that we should work together and just be there for each other, even if it's not... It's cooperative. So at the far left libertarian spectrum, you're an anarcho-communist. And excuse me. Anarcho-communist is actually really easy to explain. A lot of people say it's oxymoronic. It's not possible. No. It entirely is. An anarcho-commune is going to be like 7 people who live on a farm and do very little. And someone will, grow plants. Someone else will mow the lawn. And people just kind of do things for each other, and they don't really think about it. There's no exchange, nothing competitive. There's no quantification of the value of labor in this small group. It's kind of like a tribal situation. It's really easy for this to exist in small communities, but very quickly falls apart when you scale up and start bringing in more specialties. So let's say you then have someone who only mines ore, iron. Well, how do you quantify the value of that labor and make sure this person gets what they need as you start expanding your community? Once you get to like 100 people, well, only a couple people need the iron specifically. It's got to be smelted. It's got to be converted. It's got to be turned into things. And now we need a way to quantify the value of certain objects. This is where capitalism comes into play. No longer now are you simply just going to do things for the sake of doing it. No, at this point now you're going to try and quantify because you need to expand, you need help, you need to make sure that people are fairly receiving resources. And all the idea of capital does is create an amorphic system where value can fluctuate and people trade. You essentially have currency, a trade medium. Once you move up into the authoritarian spectrum, on the left, then you're getting like statist communism where authority dictates who gets what and what can, and that's where things are bad. The far right, in terms of free market capitalism, can work on small scales and big scales. So I don't want to deviate because we're getting into some other topics, but what I want to bring up, Milo Yiannopoulos, I don't think is a hardcore free market capitalist, but he's certainly not a socialist. So he's probably more like center right on the economic scale. In terms of the in terms of the cultural left and right, we then have the left being progressive and the right being traditional. You could call these people technically right-wing in this sense, but I still don't think Carl Benjamin, Sargon, falls into far right. he's still probably center-right when dealing with cultural issues. So he is, Family Guy, anti-feminist, anti-SJW. That, being anti-SJW, you could be a center-left position, right? It doesn't necessarily mean... so ultra-traditional would be someone who demands women stay in the home. And they, in this sense, you could talk about anti-miscegenation and white nationalism. And that's what people might mean by far-right traditionally, like keeping things back to the way they were in reactionary politics. But all of these people, save Katie Hoppins, because I don't really know much about her, and I'm not going to comment. But like Tommy Robinson is economically, I think, more like center-right, and culturally center-right. Just because he's critical of an ideology doesn't mean you can just brand them all far-right. But it seems like far-right is the go-to smear, right? And so it's really funny when they put together these lists. They have, I don't know if they show the list here, but I think this has to do with Hope Not Hate, which is like, my understanding is they're like the SPLC of the UK, Southern Poverty Law Center. They have this list of all of these like far-right personalities, and their follower count in the UK has a ton. And the UK does have a lot of personalities who are, I don't know, prominent, not far left. But I don't see how you can take someone like Tommy Robinson and accuse him of being far right when he's critical of an Abrahamic religion and more specifically the extremists of that religion. Now, in my opinion, I think Tommy uses the cause of free speech and certain issues because it works well when he focuses on Islamist extremism. But then Maajid Nawaz is also, Maajid Nawaz is an organization dedicated to combating extremism. Are we going to call him far right? No, not at all. He actually won a lawsuit against the SPLC. He's not an extremist. He's a rather centrist individual. So what's the difference? I think, you can criticize Tommy for being a blunt object and kind of, in that sense, he's not particularly precise in some of these circumstances. And he's got a lot of fans who are probably acting as blunt objects. But I don't know how you get far right from these individuals. It seems like it's more just a smear. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up on the point of this video. Right wing is a smear. It is. It literally is. In the mainstream media, if they call you right wing to smear you. Why? Isn't that weird? That's not inherently a bad thing. There are people who are conservative and they're good people. It's kind of interesting to me. I am not right wing in probably the cultural or the economic sense. I would say I'm probably center left on both. I lean more progressive. I recognize institutional racism, systemic racism. I'm in favor of immigration and a lot of things. I'm not saying that any of these people aren't, and that's what I think the point is. What qualifies these people as far right? In fact, I think on many issues, actually, Sargon of Akkad, I think, is to the left of Ben Shapiro. So how do they call him far right? But Ben Shapiro, I mean, people have called Ben Shapiro far right too. But Ben Shapiro is kind of like your run-of-the-mill conservative. He's hosted a segment on Fox News. He holds like traditional conservative religious values in the U.S. And he's probably to the right on the cultural scale and the economic scale to Sargon. So it seems like they just use far right as a smear. There you go. Anyway, stick around. I got another video coming up at 1 p.m. and I will see you then.